Welcome to the sermon for the 5th Sunday of Easter. Last week we talked about Psalm 23 and Jesus as the Good Shepherd. This icon image makes me think about how I feel with the Good Shepherd. You can see that the thought bubble above the person's head is empty. Maybe don't see it so much as empty, but as content, feeling protected and safe. The Lord is my shepherd. I would like to say that my head is this calm, but that's not the case. In life, as we move through our weeks and through our days, we are like an input gatherer. Things are inputted into us again and again and again. Our 12 senses keep collecting data and experience, whether we want them to or not. We are a container that gets filled. On any given day, and especially at 3 o'clock at night, this is how my head looks. My thought bubble, if you will. You can see in the middle here the icon for searching. Everything that we search in a week goes into our head. All the news that we read, all the questions that we have, our concerns about family and money, the ideas we have, our feelings. On Sunday mornings, we come to church. This morning, for instance, we come to church and we get filled with the Word. But the Word gets shoved in with the news and the ideas and the feelings and the people and the questions and whatever issues that we are freaking out about, or perhaps just stuck in the backs of our heads. So the Bible is in the news, and the news is with the ideas, and the ideas are with the heart, and the heart are with the people and the questions, and it just kind of goes around and around and around. This morning we heard the passage, "Abide in me, I in you, he abides in me, I in him, my words abide in you." Straightforward, right? Well, not so much when it's added to this chaos in our heads. I've been reading a book this week, which gave me the idea for all these icons for the sermon today, and this is the image. For those of you who have ever sat at a computer and started an update process, or are waiting for a website to connect, you will find this circle. Sometimes people call it the death circle because it doesn't end, and whatever it is you were looking for doesn't come up. Well, this is what is called buffering. Buffering is when our boundaries and our processing happen. Boundaries are that time spent processing the data of our lives. Too often, we do not buffer in our lives, and we have a chaotic head, like I showed in the image before. And in the chaos, we just keep shoving more and more and more and more into our heads. This buffering process is actually part of how we heal and how we need to be as people in the world, so that we can abide in me and I in you. He abides in me and I in him. My words abide in you. When we hear those words, when we hear the words from the first reading this morning, where boundaries that we would normally think are normal and convenient, and we hear the story of the eunuch and Philip, and it's like, what a nice story. Well, in fact, that story raises all kinds of issues when we stop to buffer with it, because it stretches our boundaries and our understanding of things. That reading talks about race and gender and religion and baptism and who can be teacher and baptizer and preacher. At the end, Philip is whisked away in a very non-human way and finds himself somewhere else. The story is mind-blowing on so many levels. It's about who is included, who is not included, and figuring out who and what and where and how of this Easter story. We can't do that without taking time to process and buffer. It's okay to sit and to wait. When we hear our readings, the abide in me and I in you, he abides in me and I in him, my words abide in you, we're not supposed to understand it all at the very beginning. Joanna Hari, an author on addiction, says that the opposite of addiction is not sobriety. The opposite is connection. She argues that community bonds are the antidote to the opioid crisis and loneliness, the epidemic of loneliness in our world today. Connection doesn't happen unless our boundaries are disturbed and we process those over time. Each of us speaks with an accent. We all speak human. So when we hear words this morning, like abide in me, and I in you, and he in me, and I in him, my words abide in you, we interpret this holy, divine language, and we start to translate it based on our accents. So my accents, some of them, white, Canadian, academic, creative, Christian, and there are many, many more accents that I speak with, but you hear me in a certain way because of the accent that I carry and because of the accent that you carry. It would be nice if we could wake up one day and all speak with a divine accent, where everything is in balance, where we are all connected and moving parts of the same Trinity. But that's not the case. Our world doesn't look like this, and it never will, because each of us is an accent, and we need all of those accents, all of the accents in the world, to speak to each other, to interpret the divine language which none of us will ever be able to speak while we are here on earth. But when we are connected, when we work at being connected, when we work at listening to each other's accents, particularly the ones that we do not like and we do not want to hear, those are the times when Jesus comes to us, when God is in our hearts, when buffering happens, when our boundaries shift, when we're willing to open our hearts to this process and know in the end that we change, that we are resurrected to abide in him and he in us and I in you and my words abide in you. I invite you to buffer so that resurrection can happen through our lives so that we might bear fruit in the world even with an imperfect language. I invite you into the process of resurrection by processing the data of your lives and doing that with the Word of God in the midst. Amen.